I hired a Yu-Gi-Oh coach and actually managed to win a Yu-Gi-Oh regional championship. Welcome back to the channel, hope you're having a great day. And today, instead of making the good old boring deck profile for winning a regional, I wanted to do something completely different. For this regional, I played Malice and I decided that I needed to hire a coach. And after getting coached for a few hours, for realistically the first time ever, something kind of clicked in my head, and eventually I ended up winning the entire tournament. So was it the coaching? Was it just pure raw skill? Probably not. And all the story behind the journey and answering the question, should you hire a coach? Let's talk about it. So in today's video, again, instead of doing the deck list with the cards, since it's Malice, I figured it's a little bit less interesting for you guys, but what could be interesting is kind of breaking down why I decided to get coached for just a regional and a rather small regional as well. How did I approach coaching and the process itself? What did we do in our coaching sessions, and did it help? And eventually, should you do it? So this is going to be kind of like a talking video running you through my journey to winning this regional after hiring a Yu-Gi-Oh coach. I will also show some of the deck list iterations and the decisions that we made during deck building. So let's start off from the beginning. Regional Championship Supreme Darkness format, the last one for the season, straight off of the Maze of the Master release weekend, so a lot of the new cards, including 7th Tachyon, are going to be legal. The strongest deck that I feel most comfortable with in this format was probably Malice. I played this a lot, and I still haven't managed to top with the deck, even though I find it extremely fun and extremely explosive. So because this is a period in my life where I've had to take kind of a step back from Yu-Gi-Oh and a little bit from YouTube, maybe you felt it on the channel as well, just because of work stuff, I want to focus on work a little bit more just to make sure that, I don't end up losing my job because of Yu-Gi-Oh. I didn't really have that much time to grind like Dueling Book rated, even though this might not be the best form of testing you can do. So I kind of went on Twitter, and there was a player who I saw on Twitter very active and doing pretty well with the Malice deck, but a rather lesser known player, like not one of the top YouTuber YCS champions. His name is Danilo Syracusa. He is from somewhere in Europe, so we're in the same time zone, and I figured I would just hit him a DM, and maybe he knew me from Twitter or YouTube, and he will answer the call and take me up on my coaching. So I did message him and I said like, hey, would you coach me on playing Malice? I got a regional and I think I really need that extra stuff. And he was like, of course, let's set it up. We'll have a few sessions. I'll get you ready for the event. So a few things to note when you're deciding whether you want to get coached. So some people just grind Dueling Book over and over again all day long. And it's mainly because of two facts. One, they probably enjoy it and appreciate the challenge of getting like the highest rank. But also, some people might not have a good testing group. Testing group is like a bunch of friends on Discord playing against each other, and where you can actually guarantee that your opponents are better. So the reason why I don't like testing on Dueling Book specifically to prepare for an event is the fact that you can't really guarantee the quality of your opponents. If you are lower ranked, you're going to get lower ranked opponents, which means you have to grind in order to actually have a successful grind later, which I find really, really not enjoyable. And it's also usually not the best type of testing. If you have a testing group like me, I can actually guarantee that I play against good opponents who know what they're doing. We talk over on Discord when we're playing so we can take stuff back. We can kind of understand what's happening in the game state a little bit better. And I think it's a little bit more of a quality form of testing, especially when you're preparing for an event, not just getting to know a deck. So I did have my testing group, and it's not like you're not going to have to play. Like, coaching is not magic. You're going to have to play the game, but I had a very limited amount of time to play for the event, and I wanted the coaching sessions to kind of compensate for the fact that I need that extra edge to make sure I'm in line with the format, understanding how to run the deck the most optimally, and be able to actually win. Because I haven't topped with Malice yet, and I really wanted to do that before the Forbidden Unlimited list that will probably hit some form of Malice deck. So kind of how it went was that I built the deck that I felt the most comfortable with, and one of the bonuses of, getting coached, especially by an active player, is that usually they will also give you a deck list. which was great for me because I had tested various deck lists, but he was actually preparing for the UK Open event, which means he already had a list up in his back pocket. So I got the list from him and we got to talking about the list and the optimal lines. This is what we did in our first session. It was around an hour and a half, that's it, where we discussed the decks, discussed the strategy, and he showed me some replays of him and his testing group where he run the same build and kind of explained to me the decisions and the decision making behind every move they're making. Now, I knew how to play the deck fairly well, so I didn't need like a breakdown of how to play Malice in general, but what I learned from those initial sessions was how to play conservatively, how to maintain resources, how to not overextend, and how to not just play into random hand traps. It was more about the sequencing of the plays, which cards to prioritize, the side patterns, things that you, in a vacuum, you don't really know, especially since my testing group is like all playing the other decks, and every time I ask for help for like, my Malice deck, they're like, oh, you play Malice, you're the Malice player, you know what to do best, which is not really helpful. So understanding those lines and kind of having a shift for the mental model, because, I only played Malice in like a tournament or an OTS or a local, so I didn't grind in between, so I didn't have that much experience with the deck just playing all together. And obviously I didn't have success with it in the tournaments I played it in. So this was the first session. We kind of went over not really the basics, but just like the strategy of running this specific build. And then basically he sent me off to play. And what he did was say, hey, go ahead, play as many games as you can in the 24 hours we have until our next session. And then in our next session, we're going to review the plays and I'll explain to you what you did wrong, what you did right, what you could do better. And I believe, I never got coached, but I believe this is basically how it works with every other coach. So this is what I did. And this was the part where I had to grind a little bit. I don't enjoy testing, but in order to win, sometimes you have to. So I did play against my good friends who are good, accomplished Yu-Gi-Oh players, and we just grinded. They played Fiendsmith Ryziel, I played Malice, and we were just playing game after game after game throughout the whole night. And we got some good replays. I felt really good about the deck. I started to feel like it's clicking. I started to understand the lines I was going to take. And then 24 hours later, I met up with my coach Danilo once again, and we went over the replays. So we go over the replays. Some games where I lost, or rather some matches, were preventable. So he explained to me how I could have done better in those scenarios. And this is something that you really need an external set of eyes to kind of explain to you. I really believe in feedback and iteration. This is part of my job, my day-to-day job as a designer, where you would constantly just get feedback on your work and iterate and just be open to it and listen and actually implement those changes. So essentially, this is what we did. Now, as far as the list goes, it's going to be up on the screen right now. And this was basically very similar to what he ended up playing. He had one more day to iterate and test after my regional, so he had another day to kind of change it up a little bit, but I felt it was amazing. Now, we did a few changes throughout the whole thing. We kind of thought about what happens if you get Lanciad, what's the plan, do we play cross out? You can see in the list that we're actually not playing any Molcharmies at all, and this was a great decision because Malice draws a lot and you don't want to draw dead cards. In addition, we started with the one Veiler, but I actually switched it up to one Ogre because it is still a Metal Tronus target for Heavenly Spheres, but as a hand trap, it's just a little bit better in this format than Veiler because it can hit things like the True Light and Ryziel Detonator and Ryziel Duo Drive, so it was a little bit more of a utility card. So at the end of the day, we got the finalized list. I went on to the tournament and I won 6-0. It wasn't a huge regional. It was around 60 people. I went undefeated with Malice and I won every single one of my games 2-0, except for one against Blue Eyes where I actually won 2-1. And this is probably like the easiest and most smooth regional experience I've ever had. Just sailing on through, not even losing a game, dice roll doesn't matter. I was so prepared. And this is, of course, true for a regional event. This is probably not enough to make it big in a YCS, but I think you watching this and myself, most of our events are going to be OTS championships and sometimes regionals, and that is going to be the highlight of our competitive Yu-Gi-Oh careers. That's going to be the peak. So, if I went on to play in a YCS, which I did, probably should have gotten coached better at that time. but that's a kind of a different story. On a regional level, it felt insane, and a lot of my friends asked me at the end of the event, do you think the coaching actually gave you an edge? And I was like, I'm not really sure, but I kind of think it did. Like, it really changed my outlook on the game, because sometimes, again, you're in a vacuum or testing by yourself. I would kind of compare it to how I was starting to do design work. I started to do like Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator tutorials online in my bedroom at like 13, 14, and I just design without any external help at all. And then 10 years later, I get to the Design Academy and they ask me to open Illustrator, and suddenly I see so many people doing so many different things to achieve the same outcome, where I realized I was like living in a bubble, in a self-taught bubble for the last 10 years. So it's kind of similar with Yu-Gi-Oh! You're playing a deck, you might be grinding it out on Dueling Book, but getting that external help, especially if you don't have that testing group, is really, really important for this type of event. So just in terms of coaching, to wrap it all up, I guess that I would recommend it if you're trying to win some sort of event or do well at your OTS or regional championship. If you can afford an hour or two, it doesn't have to be like 10 hours. You can hire a coach who's not like the top tier coach. Maybe someone like Danilo, who was very accomplished in YCSs and big tournaments, but doesn't necessarily charge $100 an hour for coaching, right? You probably don't need that. So finding that player you follow online and kind of reaching out to them, they'll probably coach you for a pretty good price. And if it's important to you to win the tournament, make that achievement count, then yeah, why not? Do something good for the hobby that you already waste and invest so many hours playing. Just actually make it count. So yeah, this was my coaching experience and winning the regional. This wasn't a winning the regional classic video with the deck list and stuff, but overall, I really enjoyed this experience. And again, I got coached, and eventually this was my easiest regional experience ever. I know it's a small regional, but regardless, I mean, winning 6 rounds is still something that takes a bit of an effort, especially if you're not only focused on Yu-Gi-Oh! All day, and especially if you're an old person at 34 like myself. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel. And if you like this type of content, click the bell to get notified when I upload a new video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.